Well, Ivan, we'll wait a few minutes just till everyone has the opportunity to join us.
Sounds good.
But how are you keeping on this wet afternoon in Sydney?
It's a wet, old, miserable day. I'm well.
Yeah, you're good. You've been keeping really busy with strategy season prior to...
It is strategy season, the April to June quarter. I do more strategy stuff in these 3 months than the whole rest of the year combined. So, no, things are good. Things are busy. Things are well. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, no, really good, thank you. Yeah, really good. Keeping really busy. How's the book going?
Book's going well. I dislocated my elbow last year, which put a bit of a pause to it, but we're back on track.
Business athlete.
The business athlete's all about drawing out the parallels between sport and business. As you know, I'm a sporting tragic, and it's all about the learnings I believe the business world can take from the sporting world. So it's going well. I'm up to chapter 7, so 3 more to go. Yeah.
Very good.
Enjoying the process.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so we've got a lot of people joining. We'll just give 1 to 2 more minutes before we kick off. Have you set yourself a deadline for the book, or are you just rolling with it to see when you finish it?
You're going to give me a
accountability target.
Yeah, this is public accountability at its best. June 30, the draft is due. Yeah.
This year?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Now I have to do it.
I know. Exciting. All right.
Have you got any fun projects going on?
Yeah, lots of really good stuff. In fact, doing lots of travelling around New South Wales to different client locations and do a lot of cultural diagnostic stuff. And, you know, the market is good at the moment. It's balanced. Businesses are still going for growth and hiring, but being very, very specific around who they want. Might be cutting costs in other areas, but still hiring to get that growth. So, yeah, it's good. At least we can find people who have realistic expectations when they do actually want to move now as well. Better than 2 years ago.
So we come off the bottom of the labour shortage.
Exactly. Yeah, we certainly have. So it's good. All right. So we will kick off. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This is a live webinar that we have scheduled to go to 45 minutes maximum. So the plan will be for Ivan and I to address the key points in the topics that we have shared with you all, and then we will leave 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So for us to be able to see those questions, if you can please put them in the Q&A chat box as we go through, because otherwise you may well forget those questions, and then we'll loop back into them at the end. So feel free to type those in at any point. So quick intros. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emily Wilson. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder of FutureYou. FutureYou is a one-stop shop talent management business for fast-growing organisations. So providing executive search, specialist recruitment, talent advisory and interim solutions. We set up the business with the sole purpose, the power to connect. So to enable meaningful introductions that create personal and career growth, and therefore personal and career growth that delivers growth for businesses. So in that, we do webinars, podcasts, events to share insights to enable people and businesses to grow. And Ivan, we've done a few things together with you being a leading business and leadership coach. So helping CEOs and executive teams with their strategy and execution around aligning both culture and commercials to deliver results. Anything else you want to add for that introduction?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So we've been brought together to talk about regaining the commercial edge. Want to give some context on that, please?
Yes, context, regaining the commercial edge. So, I mean, you mentioned in the intro, and we do some work together, so naturally we talk a lot.
Yes.
And we talk a lot about common themes that we see bubbling up in businesses that we work with, and just businesses in general that we talk to. And there's a few common things that are coming up. I think it's clear that the season has changed, not just literally, but the business season has changed. I think the sugar hit of the post-COVID era is done, and there is a feeling of adversity. There is a level of adversity that I think, and I think we think that is being felt, that hasn't been experienced for a while. There's a lovely quote I really like from the famous investor Warren Buffett: "A rising tide floats all boats. It's only when the tide goes out that you realise who's been swimming naked." And I think it's fair to say there's a few businesses out there that do feel like they're swimming a little bit naked. When the wind's blowing sales and revenue and profits in, it can cover up gaps and cracks. But when the tide goes out, those things get highlighted. And I think there's a few businesses that are recognising that a lot of their growth has come more from, or at least in part, more from the buoyant market rather than their own business disciplines. That's not always true, though. There's other businesses on the other side that don't feel that. There's other businesses that are not feeling like they're swimming naked, and they are seeing the tide go out, but it's having less of an effect. So the topic of today is regaining the commercial edge, and I think the idea is a conversation that we're going to have that shows the common sides on both ends, the ones that are doing it and what are the common themes, but also the common themes in the businesses that aren't. So what are the common mistakes? Anything to add to that?
And no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that coming out of COVID, there was certainly a number of industry sectors that had huge demands on their products and services. Mm-hmm. And so the businesses became really operationally led. So operations delivering the revenue, which resulted in profits, rather than having to look at growth strategies. Yeah. So I think, we can't be too hard on ourselves in the fact that we've gone from delivery to now looking at market conditions that are more challenging and having to create the demand more to therefore deliver on revenue expectations, profit, EBITDA basically, and that often needs a different skill set as well, I think. But every business would be in very similar situation. So the first point we wanted to cover off is what are the common traits of businesses that have maintained their commercial edge that we're seeing with the people that we're talking to at the moment.
What do you think?
I think it is businesses, number one, who have transparent communication around things that are going well and things that are not going well. And they have an operating rhythm and a culture that supports feedback. Being honest. So number one, having the environment to feel safe to be able to bring up the feedback. And number two, having the time to be able to have the feedback and the follow through to actually address what the real blind spot might be. So for me, it's that how to have constructive feedback and some tough conversations. In fact, I would say would be the number one thing. But if businesses have got that, it's a brilliant place to start.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Honesty delivered in a respectful way. Super critical, otherwise you'll never surface the real issues. But on the other side, it's equally important to recognise the good stuff, isn't it? So yes, I agree. I would underline that point.
And it's not easy actually, is it? Because lots of businesses I think have focused so much on culture and well-being and safety because we have all had to, with pandemic, safety, well-being, mental health, number one, and still is. But then to be able to now go, the market conditions have changed somewhat, and we need to adapt and reskill and refocus can be a really tough conversation.
I would agree 1,000%. I think one of the common themes that I see sort of building on that point for the businesses that have reclaimed or maintained their commercial edge, they're very intentional on what the purpose of the culture is. It's not culture for culture's sake. I walk into a lot of businesses where they do all these cultural activities, the values up on the wall, all the team building activities, and that's fantastic. And I think they've got a good culture because the team gets along. But the staff aren't being honest with each other, not truly honest. They're not holding each other accountable and they're not challenging each other. And I think that's a real issue. And if that is happening to your culture, it is really important to go back to the why. And my opinion that the why for culture, the purpose of culture should be closely related to improving the people and their skills, improving the team and improving business performance. And if that is the mindset and there's a clear link between culture and improvement, it opens up a different set of behaviours and conversations where people are more willing to be honest and challenge each other and push each other a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think it comes down, the role of a CEO or business leader communicating what they're seeing as the market conditions that are changing, and how that might mean that the strategy might have to adapt or change. And then each part that, the individuals and employees have to play in that is absolutely key as well. Because it's something that can't just be set for 12 months and that's it. It's something that's got to be readdressed depending on what's being seen in the market. You got to stay relevant. Based on the different things that are happening, both in terms of customer behaviour but also technology. Stay relevant. We've also talked about structure, because I think that to regain the commercial edge, it's have the organisations got the right people in the right seats to deliver revenue and profit. Are the right leaders to operationally led versus, having a role where they can be more outbound or forward plan, or who is responsible for the strategy to grow the business and how it's actually going to be executed. The difference between the how and the doing. I don't know if you agree.
I agree 100%. So a well-organised structure, always really important, but it needs to serve the strategy. So if the strategy is more focused on growing and strategic growth and initiatives, new product development, moving into new markets or acquisition, the leadership needs the capability and the capacity to focus on that. If the strategy is more about consolidation and tightening up system, process, structure and developing people capability, the leadership needs to be leaning into that. So the structure always has to be well organised, always has to be clear. They're the obvious statements. People need to be empowered to make decisions rather than it all going up to one thing. So they're the common things that you want out of a structure. There's a flow in decision making, but the key leaders need to be able to be focused on what the key strategic priorities are for the business. So the structure must serve the strategy.
Yes. We definitely, a couple of trends that we're seeing, in the times where we were incredibly talent short, everyone's roles were pretty broad, actually, and having to do an awful lot. Where now we're definitely seeing that hiring and sign off on roles are becoming really specific around the value that they're going to add the organisation. So, for example, FP&A leaders. So someone who works with finance to look at the planning, the data, the reports, analysing it to use more commercially rather than just having a finance team. Or actually going, our BDMs are truly key account managers, and they're really good key account managers who need to continue doing that, but we need to identify, attract and develop more business development managers to then create more demand and more sales and more revenue and profit.
So do you think businesses are clearer now on exactly what they need?
Yes.
Right. And that's happened just recently?
In the last 12 months, for sure. And
what do you think is the reason?
Because of trying to regain the commercial edge around, we just can't put a very broad role that's really generalist. It's got to be specific to add value to the business and to add value to the team.
It's amazing how much sharpness returns to thinking when the tide goes out.
True.
Because it's all there. It's all there to be seen. You can't cover it up anymore, and it makes businesses better. And I think just that sort of leads me to another point, the common theme of businesses that are claiming their edge, the mindset, the mindset piece, that they're treating success. In my opinion, successful businesses are led by leaders usually that have a really healthy relationship with adversity. They don't see it as a bad thing.
I
think there's something to be said for acknowledging the gift of adversity. So when you think about your own life and when the learnings happened and when you learned resilience, it usually didn't happen in the easy times. When you get clear as a business on exactly what you need, that usually happens in the tougher moments. And that all comes back to mindset, I believe, and how you see things. And mindset's one of those things that's talked about a lot. It's usually towards the front of most leadership books. And there's a reason for that, because it's important. Consciously choosing how you see things has a massive effect, and consciously choosing how you see adversity helps you see it for what it really is. There's a start, there's an end. It's not a forever thing, and it can be an opportunity. And if you see it that way, you'll use it that way. If you don't, and you see adversity as something bad or wrong, or you just, focused on all the things that you can't control, you won't use it for the opportunity. And there's tons of examples. I might actually share one. I'm working with a manufacturer who's into Generation 2. They've been around for 40 years, so they've seen it all. Generation 1, the founder's seen it all. It talks about the 20+% interest rates in the 80s and the 90s recession and so on. And that business is going through a tough moment, and it's just amazing watching his energy. He's so calm and he's so composed, and it's more than that, actually. He's genuinely optimistic, and just seeing someone that's been around the block a few times and how they see adversity a little bit differently, I think is quite telling.
Yes, yeah. And probably because they've seen those different cycles.
Yeah.
I genuinely think there's a huge part of the workforce who have been in a really demand-led environment.
Yeah.
That's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's just how it's been.
Yeah.
And, they haven't been in an environment where they've necessarily been in the office every day,
Yeah.
learning and adapting,
Yeah.
and upskilling in areas, because they haven't been in the office so much as well. So there's lots of challenging factors where, is there been a gap in developing staff during the last 4 years as well? And now businesses are maybe trying to play catch up on that, and all scrambling on the let's invest in our people at L&D. We're definitely seeing a higher demand in L&D again. Absolutely. Let's develop our people to get them the most out of all employees.
Tends to happen in survival mode, doesn't it? The people development piece tends to fall by the wayside.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah. And what about on the flip side then? I mean, we've talked about some of it.
Can I just add one more on that side? Just in terms of the common personality traits of ones that are maintaining their commercial edge. Focus. Focus. Good strategy does less better. And the ones that I see that are doing it better are focused on less things. They out of 1,000 things that need to be done, they're really, really clear on those 3 or 4 things that will have the most impact, and they stay true to them. They stay focused to that. They don't pick and stick. They don't change their mind every week on what the priority is. They don't let the daily whirlwind overwhelm them. They don't let the urgent stuff scream so loud that there's no capacity for the important, not urgent. They're really clear on the key things that matter, and they stay focused on them, and they protect a bit of capacity around the important, not urgent. I wanted to throw that in because I think, especially in the strategy season, you're setting your strategy for the year ahead, being super clear on what those big 3 or 4 things are. It's really powerful being able to sit back and say FY25 is the year of X, Y, and Z, and they're non-negotiable priorities. Super important.
And what about the actual discipline to continue to follow that through? Because I think it's very prevalent in businesses in strategy season and forecasting and budgeting. There has to be a focus, whether it's to report to shareholders or to report to the business what the vision is, but then it's so often can be forgotten. And maybe this leads on to the next point around what are some of the common mistakes that we see with businesses who have lost the commercial edge around not having the discipline and the structure in place to actually make sure that what has been set is being executed.
I think it's the same thing. So the personality traits for the ones that are maintaining their commercial edge have the discipline, and the common mistake on the other side is that they don't. I agree with that. I've got some thoughts on that. Do you want to go? So I think there's a study that was done on children way back when, and the experiment went like this. A child was given a marshmallow and they were told, if you can avoid the temptation of eating that marshmallow for say 10 minutes, you're going to get another one. And so it's a really interesting study in that there's a percentage of children that couldn't avoid the temptation and they ate it, and there's a percentage of children there's a percentage that could avoid the temptation and they got the reward. And it's all about delayed gratification, and it's actually going back to mindset. It is a mindset piece, and in my opinion and in my experience, businesses that are not as good at staying focused, there's 2 things. One, they're generally led by a leader that has a real problem with delayed gratification and they want to jump at the next opportunity, or they've just become overwhelmed by the daily whirlwind and they haven't designed strategic capacity in the key roles. They have not designed enough capacity in the key roles that are always there to progress the strategic priorities, always there to progress the important, not urgent. So I think there's a combination of mindset that, in terms of common mistakes that lead to a lack of focus, there's a mindset piece where we're just jumping to the next opportunity or the next issue, and also a structural piece where we haven't designed enough strategic capacity.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, at some point, every quarter, not every year, just reminding and saying, what does each position need to be do to be successful and effective in their role at the moment? And, the person in the role being very clear around what they might need to be supported or developed in to be successful in that role. Because it might change depending on, what the conditions are. Not fundamentally change, but might need to be refocused in different areas. So I think having that, operating rhythm to check in and see whether people are actually performing the role that they want to perform and should be performing, rather than just always using the context of the environment that they might be in. It's actually their role and their outputs that create the environment as well.
Yeah, accountability frameworks are super critical, and every business does this in a slightly different way. But having your own rhythm that forces a track, measure, monitor, how are we going against those things that we said? If we said we were going to do 10 push-ups, did we do them? And if we're not, why not? Going back to that honest conversation, the importance of having those honest conversations to create a sense of accountability and having a process around that every month or every 90 days to check in on that, super important.
Okay, all right. What about the balance of businesses focusing on happiness, well-being, culture, environment, versus, some of the conversations we've had around accountability, now regaining the commercial edge, structure. Yeah.
I'm really passionate on this point. And you and I have talked at length at this. So thank you for opening the door to this, because I think it's a really important point. And it's the flip of the earlier point. So one of the common things with successful businesses is they've got that balance right. On the other side, the balance is not right. And culture is coming. I see examples where culture is actually coming at the expense of commercial outcomes. Culture. So I want to be really clear on this message. Culture is a super important asset of any business. That has to be sort of, I want to make sure that message is clear. Culture is a super important asset, and there's tons of content out there, webinars, books, and so on that talk about culture. And I think to a large extent, most businesses and most business leaders have taken that on board and are investing in that culture. But in my humble opinion, I think a lot of businesses are doing that and not 100% clear on why they're doing it, or they were clear on why they were doing it and they've forgotten why they were doing it. And going back to an earlier point, my view on culture and the why for culture is it needs to be closely linked to improving people, improving teams, and improving business performances. And I see a lot of evidence and a lot of examples of culture that are getting a lot of investment. And it's not just that they're not improving businesses, they're actually making them worse, as crazy as that sounds. And I'll give you an example to illustrate what I mean. I was talking to a leader recently. They went through COVID it was horrible. It just ravaged the business, and there was huge impacts, layoffs and reduced working hours, and the people were battered and bruised. And the leadership team sat down and said, you know what, we've got to look after our people here. They've gone through a rough time. And so they made some conscious choices. They dialed back a little bit on some accountabilities, and they really dialed up some support things. They put a lot more money and time and energy into supporting their people, which they needed to do. The business needed them to do that. But the problem is somewhere along the line, standards started to drop and leaders did nothing about it. They were worried about having these difficult conversations because they didn't want to undo the goodwill. They didn't want to undo the good cultural work that was happening. And in some cases, they did have a good culture because everyone was happy. That word happy got thrown around a lot. But in pursuit of that happiness, or in pursuit of that protecting people's happiness, bad habits were creeping in and they were going unchecked. And somehow the culture and the commercial got disconnected completely, and they were actually in competition with each other. So culture is there to serve the strategy. It's there to serve the business. And what's happening, I think, in some cases, is it's going the opposite way.
Yes.
And that's a real problem.
Yeah. Amazingly said. Amazingly said. There are no new ways of going bust.
Yeah.
You know, you can have lots of happy people, but you need to have create revenue that is above your costs, and you need to get paid.
Yeah.
You know, and it's as much the focus and the discipline around that, and breeding success as it is, just being happy and having great relationships, but not having the results that you need.
On the book that I'm writing, The Parallels Between Sport and Business, Jurgen Klopp, who's people that know me on the call know that he's a bit of a hero of mine. He's a manager of a soccer team over in England called Liverpool. He has this awesome process that he does every year. So every year he gets his players to sign a contract. So the contract isn't the financial legal thing. It's a cultural contract. And what it does is it lays out a set of standards, a set of expectations in terms of what's expected of the player from a mindset, attitude, energy, behaviour point of view, in and around training, in and around games and so on. I just think that's a really cool process. And the way they do that is Klopp and Jurgen and his coaching staff each season, they sit back and say, right, what happened this season? And in order to increase our chances of winning next season, what specific behaviours do we need to dial up or down? And I love that process, and I love the order of that process. They start with winning. In order to increase our chances of winning, what culture do we need? And I think there's something to be said for that order. And I think that there's a lesson there, I think, for a lot of businesses to get clear on what their idea of winning is, and that's different for different businesses. What is your vision? What is your goals? And in that context, what behaviours do you want to see? What culture do you want to see? It's got to be linked to that. Otherwise, if you allow culture to be defined separately or managed separately, it can become counterintuitive. It can work against the strategy.
And when you're hiring or promoting internally, really assessing and checking not just on skills and experience, but on behaviour and character traits to enable that mobility into a new role or adaptability in a new market, which is certainly some of the work that we've done together. I mean, even in our own business, when I do our results every quarter, and we do them every half, we do them every year, I probably over-communicate, but I'd rather do that than under-communicate. You know, we have a slide up that shows our psychologically safe environment that we have, because we've got a team that we've retained and an unbelievable team that we're all very proud of and work very hard to stay together. But then it's the frame of work of what constructive conflict looks like, and a feedback circle, because you can't just have, I mean, that is a psychologically safe contract, basically, that he's getting them to opt into. And organisations have that too. But it's then having more than that, either the behaviours or having the feedback loop or the action plans and the clear priorities and making them only 3 things and having the discipline to keep checking in on them, that really gets the longevity in terms of results, rather than just the short, sharp focus, I think.
I agree. I agree.
Anything else in terms of mistakes that we think businesses are making at the moment?
I think another one worth highlighting is, I see this a lot, businesses never take the time to consolidate their growth. So growth is really cool. We all want it, but it can create a mess if it keeps going unchecked. And there needs to be, from time to time, a strategic phase where the business takes some time to consolidate. And what do I mean by consolidate? It's just checking in to ensure that the system, process, structure and people capability is right for where the business wants to go. Not right for where it was, but right for where the business wants to go. So if you were a $5 million turnover business and now you're a $50 million business and you're still sitting on the same structure and your direct reports have ballooned out to 30, that's probably a problem. And you're probably outgrowing your structure. If you're still sitting on the same systems and processes as you were 10 years ago and you've 10x'd your revenue, or whatever the growth period is, if you're still sitting on old systems and processes, at some point that's really going to hurt you. And I think a telltale sign, it goes back to an earlier point, we'll say a telltale sign that a business needs some consolidation is if the key leaders in the business can't give at least 20% of their time and energy to work on the business and not in it. If that can't happen, I think it's a telltale sign the business has probably outgrown itself and it needs some consolidation.
Yeah, such a good point. A lot of our conversations are with fast-growing organisations. Yeah. One of them is an industrial client that we were introduced to last week, a state-based business that's privately held and grown from 20 million to 50 million, and now at that number, and they've only been in place for 5 years. Great bunch of people, and their finance structure is so simplistic. It's still as it was when it started out.
Right.
You know, so the challenges around cash flow, collections, credit checks with their customers and suppliers. And, you know, I think that it's then looking at what support the executive team have as the pillars of excellence for those operational, you know, and sales areas, and hiring for the future.
Yeah.
So going, what do we actually need today? You know, and in that instance, it might be we actually need a financial controller, and it's like, no, actually, you might need a credit manager today, but you actually then need to hire a head of finance to hire and continue to grow for the future. And so, you know, a lot of the really progressive organisations, either boards or CEOs, are the ones who say we want for now, but actually, what do we need to know what good looks like in the person that we hire to help get us to that point? Not just who's done what we need them to do today and next week.
Yeah, so important. Yeah, getting the right people for where you're going, getting the right structure, making sure the platform, what I mean by platform, system, process, structure, people capability is right. Because otherwise it can become catastrophic. In my experience, most failures happen because of uncontrolled growth, not from a lack of growth. It comes from unconsolidated growth. The issues, unconsolidated growth can cause catastrophic issues. And sometimes those issues are known and they're the good ones. But the really dangerous ones are the ones that are invisible. The example that comes to mind is, as we're just talking about this, I was talking to a business owner who supplies into the construction industry, and they've had a change in season. They had a lot of years of rising tide, and it covered up a lot of cracks. And now the tide's going out, and it's there to see. So they're looking under the hood, and they're horrified by some of the things that they're seeing, because now they've got the time and the capacity, and they actually have to look at things in more detail. And he was just sharing one example of many, one example where one particular product had been mispriced for a decent amount of time. Someone put the wrong code in some system and it wasn't picked up. And the financial impact of this business was over $1 million, and it just hadn't been picked up. And the reason it hadn't been picked up is because no one was looking. The business was way exceeding its budgets for so long. No one was looking closely at this sort of stuff. So they're the dangerous issues, the ones that you don't even know are there. And that, in my experience, is common for unconsolidated growth. So that, I think that's an important point in terms of common mistakes. Yes. You've got to take time. From time to time, you've got to take some time to prioritise system, process, structure, and people capability. Yes. As hard as that is for growth-minded people, it's critical.
Yeah. It's critical. Boards are reviewing CEO's performance.
Yeah.
Now the tide's gone out.
Yeah.
You know, is the CEO the right CEO for these market conditions now? CEOs are looking at their key pillars. Is my CFO the right person?
Yeah.
To really ensure that we are commercially and financially in the best position today, but also for our medium to long term plans. The person who's responsible for people, whether it's HR or an HRD, have they got their plans in place? Sales versus operations, which need to be two very distinct areas, where I think that in a lot of businesses, they're still way too combined.
Yeah.
And then if all of those pillars, you know, have got the right people with the right plans, then it can lift the performance underneath.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not all down to just one individual or just culture. It's down to so many different moving parts.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
I've got one more common mistake. Do you have any more?
No, please go for it.
I just see this a lot where businesses, that they don't seem to know what sets them apart. It's a noisy world out there. There's a lot of businesses vying for people's attention. So you've got to stand for something. So if you don't stand for something, you do get lost in the noise. I mentioned strategy season is coming up. I do a lot of strategy workshops, and there's a little game I play in a lot of them. Why don't we just play it quickly now?
Okay, sounds good.
Who was the first man, or who was the first person to go to land on the moon?
Neil Armstrong.
Second?
Don't know.
Yeah. So no one knows. Well, not many people know the second, and certainly no one knows the third. So there's a message in that. If you're not one, you're last, and if you're not first, you're lost in the noise. And that doesn't mean being number one in a Google in the world. It means in the lane that you are competing. Even if you're a fish and chip shop in Bondi, in the lane that you are competing, you've got to be number one in the thing that makes you different. Every business has something a little bit different. Their product, their service, or the way they manage relationships, or their culture, or their personality. There's something that's a little bit different. And in my opinion, a lot of businesses don't really understand what that is about. It's almost a lack of self-awareness. They don't really understand themselves. And if you don't understand that about your business, you do get lost in the noise, and you can become a commodity. And if you become a commodity, you're really competing on price. I have to give another Jurgen Klopp. He's my hero. Just a story around this because I love it. In one of his earlier interviews when he first joined Liverpool, he said his goal was he wanted to implement a playing philosophy in Liverpool that was so different that you could tell it was Liverpool even if they were wearing a different colour shirt. I think that's really powerful, and I think I think businesses should have the same goal. Your brand is the experience that you're creating for your clients, and the goal should be they should know who you are, irrespective of the colour of the logo. So I think that's another common mistake. Businesses just don't know what sets them apart, and they get lost in the noise as a result.
Excellent. So good. So good. Thank you. All right. So just conscious of time, let's talk about the one thing that we believe that can be done to regain the commercial edge.
One thing. I love the idea of one thing. Do you want me to go first?
Well, can I go first?
No.
You might say mine. You go first. So for me, it definitely comes back to being able to have constructive feedback, because unless you have got that in place and everyone opts into that as a behaviour, as a culture, as an environment, then nothing can get through.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how good the idea is or how unique the selling proposition of that organisation is, or maybe different, but it needs to be embedded and always trained.
Yeah.
Actually trained how to have those conversations, which I think is actually another podcast in itself.
Yeah. I think that's a great one. I would agree with that. If I could add
Please.
Strategy season. If you are doing some planning for the financial year ahead, get clear on your rocks. Rocks is a word for just priorities. Just get clear on the key things that matter most. There will be 1,000 things that you could probably do. There'll be 100 problems that you're trying to solve, or 100 opportunities that you're trying to execute against. Zoom out, get clear on what matters most for the financial year ahead. And then going back to an early point, ensure that your culture is promoting the behaviours that are going to support that strategy. Don't let it be culture for culture's sake. So if you've got a product that's losing relevance and you need more outside the box thinking, make that a value, make that a standard. If your business is going backwards because people aren't following process, make that a value. If your strategy isn't being implemented because people aren't following through on their commitments, make that a value. So be clear on your rocks and on your priorities, and then also make sure that your culture is promoting the behaviours that your strategy needs. Don't let them become separate things.
Yeah. We also had off the recording conversation around making clear decisions around, people who buy into those behaviours.
Yes.
So when you're hiring, promoting or developing, just keep checking in, because people might actually have different points in their career, in their life, where they're at different stages. So, don't just assume that people are comfortable in that environment, because they might not be.
Yeah.
And just having those check-in points.
The honest conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right. Have any questions come through? Let's have a look. No questions yet. Any questions from anyone, please feel free to send through. I mean, what we are going to be doing from here is with the recording of the event, we'll send it to everyone who registered and everyone who attended as well. So they've got a copy of that with your contact details, with my contact details, so that we can have a follow-up conversation if needed, to assist with anything that's sort of come up. Anything else, Ivan, that you want to share while we've got the time around regaining the commercial edge?
No, I wanted to leave it with the one thing.
Yes.
Because that sort of, if we sort of go on to another thing, it'll go against the idea of
Yes.
things. So no, if anything, I just underline for me the one thing: clear on the priorities and make sure the culture supports those priorities.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, as always, for doing this together.
Absolute pleasure. It's always a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you. And look forward to the next one. There'll definitely be a next one, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.